LIVEcast, LIVEcast, welcome to the LIVEcast, 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 welcome to the show. LIVEcast, LIVEcast, welcome to the LIVEcast, 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 welcome to the show.
Well, hello everybody, and welcome to the LIVEcast. Although I hope you can hear me. Now an aeroplane is now flying over my head to basically drown me out. But hopefully you can hear what's going on at least a little bit. If you are listening on the podcast on Friday, or even if you're watching right now, you may be thinking, well, hang on a minute, this is not what I'm used to. This is not Speak Life. You appear to be sitting in a garden, and we are. I am sitting in my garden in Crowborough, and it's a very nice warm day, so welcome to all of you. If you weren't watching or listening in last week, and you're wondering what is going on, Glenn is away on sabbatical for a good number of weeks now, and so instead of our normal LIVEcast, we're still going to be live every Tuesday, because here we are. But I'm going to be speaking to a different person each week. I'm going to be doing some interviews, and that's why I'm really pleased to be able to introduce you to Fay. Hi, Fay. You all right?
Hi, Paul. Yeah, I'm fine, thank you.
Good.
Nervous.
Don't be nervous. Nothing to be nervous about. Don't worry at all. Don't worry at all. I'm going to be talking to Fay in a moment. I'm going to be interviewing her about her life and kind of coming to faith and how Jesus has worked in her life. Just to say that if you're on Facebook right now, you're watching live, and you want to ask questions, feel free to type stuff in the comment box. I will do my best to kind of see what's going on. It may be that I'll save questions till near the end, but if there are some that pop up partway through that look good, I might jump in with those straight away. Already a few people commenting, by the way. Say hello to a few people. Oh, look, some people watching in. So Lindsay Edwards.
Oh.
Hey, Lindsay. So we know Lindsay, so that's great. So we'll say hello. Good. Great. Okay, so, Fay, just tell us a bit about yourself, first of all. Who are you? Who is Fay Summers?
Well, I'm Fay Summers. I'm married to Greg Summers. We have 3 wonderful children and 6 fabulous grandchildren. Greg is the verger at All Saints Church, and we are, very, very committed Christians, members of All Saints, and we love it. It's our church family, and yeah, that's where we are.
Great. Yeah, and so Fay and I, we've known each other now for probably coming on 9 years, is it? Yeah, since when I worked at the church, and so I worked with Fay's husband, Greg, for a good 8 years of that, and that was great fun. So, Fay, I mean, some people might have already seen on the kind of blurb about this, we're talking about finding Christ, kind of growing up in an abusive family.
Yeah.
So, your story does kind of go back really to when you were a child. So tell us a bit about your family and what family life was like for you when you were growing up.
Okay, well, I was born in Yorkshire. My mum and dad, they should never have had children. My mum didn't have a maternal bone in her body, and my dad was just a bully and a violent man. And so I have, there's 5 of us. I had 3 brothers and a sister, and life was very hard because my dad was a villain. He was a professional boxer, but then because of his fighting outside of the ring was not allowed to fight professionally anymore. Mm-hmm. And he was in and out of prison, and so we lived in squats because when he went, Mum didn't have any money. When he went to prison, didn't have any money, and so we were in and out of different homes, and she left us with our grandparents, and she was just not a good mum. Mm. And when Dad was home, it was just violence because he would just batter us and batter Mum, and it was a scary place. But then I knew no different. I just assumed that's what everybody's house was like, what everybody's home was like, and everybody's dad. He went to prison when he was in and out of prison all the time. And we moved from Yorkshire down to Sussex when I was 8. And it was then that my dad, he was a burglar. He used to take me, I was so skinny and little, he used to take me burgling with him. And if you don't ever leave your little skylight windows open, because he used to push me through those, and I would open the main window and open the door and let him in. And so that's what he did. And then he started abusing me sexually at that age as well. And it was just terrifying. It was a terrifying time. And I remember telling my mum when I must have been about 10. He always told me never to tell anyone. And I told my mum when I was 10, and my mum told me not to tell anybody else. Because he was an adulterer. He was always going off with other women. And I guess, I mean, as an adult, I can think this. She just thought, well, he's not going to leave. He's not leaving her for me. And so it was easier for her to have him abusing me than going off with some other woman. So that was another strand of abuse that was just dreadful. And she used to blackmail me to do stuff she would ask me to do the laundry or wash up or whatever. And if I didn't do it immediately, she would say, well, in that case, you're going to stay at home with your dad tonight on your own. I'm going out. So she used it against me, which was when I think as a mother, but then, like I said, she hadn't got a maternal bone in her body. And so that was hateful.
So obviously just horrific stuff. And give us some idea of some of the other things you were exposed to. So I know you talked about kind of weapons in the house and things like that as well. My dad
he was a very strange man because he was generous. He was very generous. And if he had money, he would give it away. And he would come home with all sorts of odd things for the boys. I mean, he used to make the boys box, and I would have to stand in the middle of the room, and he would tell them to give me a left cross or an uppercut, and I would have to be the punch bag. And they didn't want to do it. My brothers didn't want to do it, but they had to, because if they didn't hit me, he would hit them. And so it was horrible. And Dad had bull terriers, Staffy bull terriers, which were lovely dogs, but Dad would have them fighting, and quite often we would have a dog fight in our front room, and his mates would, and they'd put money on it and all that, and so there was blood and guts all over our living room. And my mum was not a housewife at all, and so she would go to a jumble. So if there was blood on muck and revoltingness on the carpet, she didn't think to clean it or hoover. She would just go to a jumble sale and get another carpet and put it on top, because that would be underlay. Yep. And so I said, we're all going to be hunchbacks at this rate. We just keep, we
up against the ceiling.
Yeah, against the ceiling. And she wouldn't cut the carpet either. It would lap up the skirting boards. And for some reason, my dad, the coal bunker was below, outside the back door by the kitchen window, and it really was cold. So my dad knocked a hole through under the sink into the back of the coal bunker, so that we could get coal out. You go into the kitchen under the sink to get the coal. And we lived near fields, so in the winter all these mice would come in, and they would have the run of the house. This carpet edging up all the rooms was a lovely run for all the mice. Yeah. And the dog would be going crackers trying to catch these mice. So it was when I think back to it, and when I became a mum and wanted my children to have the very best and give them a loving home, when I think back, I think this just seems unreal what we lived with. And when my dad was in prison, and there was no coal, we just smash up the furniture and burn the furniture and burn shoes and burn anything. It was a really hard. It was hard, and really, I suppose it was very hard for my mum. She didn't have an easy time, but she was a very selfish woman. It was all about her. She used to have a riding crop by the fire, and she used to thrash us with this riding crop. And she once beat my brother John, whipped him so badly. He was about 7. So badly with this thing, he couldn't go to school. Because she knew she'd be in big trouble, and she kept him off. He had wheels all over him. We thought we had to stop her because I thought she was going to kill him. And so she was. They should, like I say, they should never have been allowed within 100 meters of children. Really. And so there were. So how many children were there at that point? There was 4 up to that point. Was 3 brothers and me.
And then you had a younger sister
when I was 13.
Yeah. And just tell us a bit about kind of what your role was then with your younger sister.
Well, Dad had gone to prison just after Kayla was born, I think. That was the last time he went to prison. And my sister was just born. And my mum didn't like kids. And so here she had this baby. And Kayla was beautiful. She was this lovely little thing. And she was given to me. And I had her in my bedroom, and I was the one that got up and fed her.
And you're 13.
I was 13. I changed her. She called me, when she started walking, she thought I was her mum. She called me mummy. I didn't go to school much after she was born, because I looked after her. And, it was an odd, but I loved it, because she loved me. Kayla loved me, and we weren't loved. We were very tight. My brothers, they were mad. I just adore the bones of them. They were mad. And my dad, as I said one time, my dad came home with all these guns, and he gave us all a gun, air rifles. Phil had a 2.2 actually. His was a 2.2, and so it had little bullets, little tiny bullets. And he decided he wanted to be a bank robber, and so he said he was going to have a sawn-off shotgun. So he sawed this thing and came out, and he'd sawed the handle off. And he said, "You idiot, it's the other end you saw off." So then he sawed it off, sawed the barrel off, and then he couldn't break it, he couldn't open it, so he put a 6-inch nail in there, and a 6-inch nail, broke it, but he'd already put the bullet in.
Right.
And took the trigger guard off, and when he let go to close it, he caught the trigger and shot his finger off, and it was hanging off, and with it, mad. And I've got holes, well, not holes, but little scars all around my ankles where they used to make me dance, shooting at me. But that was fun, actually. That was fun. We used to play down the fields and have these guns each and shoot each other. And
I remember when talking to you about this, you said, in a sense, you didn't know this was out of the norm.
No, no other kids were allowed to play with us. I didn't know that. We were the convicts' kids, so nobody was allowed to play with us. Nobody ever came home. But you'd be embarrassed. Well, I don't know if I would have been embarrassed. It's just home. It was just a mess. So that was just norm for us.
Yeah. So life is pretty awful. Abusive father, a mum who's not particularly interested or maternal, looking after, at the age of 13, looking after your younger sister, and you yourself having been out stealing and...
Yeah, we were all excellent shoplifters.
Yeah.
Mum used to say to me, go down the shop and get some bacon. She never ever gave me any money. I just have to go and nick a packet of bacon.
Yeah, oh my goodness. It seems unbelievable when you think about it.
I found the other day, it made me laugh in a way. I remember doing my Christmas shopping in Haywards Heath, and there was Woolworths was there, and I went in to do my Christmas shopping, and with no money, and so I got my granny and my mum a little bracelet, and I nicked them, and I found this bracelet when my granny died. She'd kept it, and when I looked at it, it was the 10 Commandments on a little bracelet. It's just a tinny little. I still have it actually, and I thought, oh Lord, honestly, I nicked it, and it was on a little bracelet, little charm bracelet with all the 10 Commandments hanging off. So yeah.
So there's all this kind of horror. And it is a horror story, like kind of going on in your life. And then I'm not sure how old you were at the time, that your dad went to prison. And that's when things kind of changed. So tell us a bit about what happened there.
Well, Dad went to prison, and he'd got so violent, really. I was beating the boys up. He nearly killed my brother Kenny one time, and my mum, actually, first time I ever seen her be maternal, went out and hit him up the side of the head with a spade because he was trying to drown Kenny in a barrel, and he got Kenny's head in his barrel, and my mum had to hit him with a spade to get him off. And he just was, the boys were growing up, and he was just hateful to them, hateful. And so we'd said to Mum when he went to prison, please don't have him back. And so she'd had enough because he was battering her as well, and so she said she wasn't going to have him. We were so thrilled. Oh, that's fabulous news. He's not coming back. And then this little old lady came to our door, and she was a JW. And my mum was...
So someone soaring in the background, just really helpful. I mean, this couldn't be going any better, Faye. If the internet keeps dropping and there's men soaring in the background, the JW's a bit hard door in a minute. No, it's just...
Well, we'll plod on. Yes, this lady came and said, you know, Mum, could she have a drink? And so Mum let her come in, and then that was it. She just came back every week, and Mum was telling her that she wasn't going to have my dad back, and she said, "Oh no, you're married. You can't do this. You're before God. You can't do this. You've got to have him back and give him another chance." I wanted to punch that old lady. I did. Shut up! What do you know, you silly old woman? Get out! You know, they're really cross. We were all cross with this old lady, and she was persistent. And she came back. So in the end, my mum had said, "I think I will give him another chance." And we just thought, I can't bear it. And in prison, it was Christmas time, and Dad had the screw came into the cell and said, "Did anybody want to go down to chapel?" And Dad said if he went to church, it would fall on him. And so he stayed in his cell. And his cellmate went, and Dad said that while he was in his cell, he heard what he subsequently found out to be the 23rd Psalm. And he just found himself on his knees and just sobbing and asking God's forgiveness. And he just felt that God was real. He said it was a very incredible moment. This singing of the 23rd Psalm was just beautiful. So when his cellmate came back, he said to him, "What was that song you were singing?" And he told him the words, and his cellmate said, "We didn't sing that. We never sang that." And he said, "But it is in the Bible." And he was on cleaning duty, his cellmate. And so he said, so Dad said, "Well, can you get me a Bible, nick me a Bible from the chapel?" So he said he would. And so Dad then had this Bible, and he just devoured this Bible. And he wrote to Mum and said, you know, she'd sent him a letter saying she didn't want him back. And he had then agreed to kill somebody. Somebody in prison had asked him if he would kill somebody. And he thought, well, I've got no family, I've got no responsibilities, no ties, I can do it. And really go into the life that he wanted to be into all the time. And so he had to go back to this chap and say I couldn't do it. And he thought there would be consequences for that, but there never was. And so we were all just devastated that she was having him back. And when he came home, we were just, you know, just fed up. But when he came, he was different. There was a thing about him that was different. He looked different and he acted different. He had never, ever touched me in any way other than to hurt me. And I can remember vividly standing in our kitchen in Glebe Road, and he put his arm on my shoulder, and I could feel I tensed up because I was expecting him to hurt me. He used to do this thing where he'd I had long hair, he'd wrap his hand in my hair and bang me up against the wall. I have suffered with spinal problems all my life, and I'm sure that's where it all started. But anyway, he put his hand on my shoulder, and he sort of did this matey thing where he sort of patted me, and I didn't understand it. I couldn't, you know, thinking, what is he going to do? What's he doing? And I think he was trying to be kind. He was trying to be nice, trying to be a dad. And here I was, 14, and this was a very odd thing, very strange. And the same with my brothers. Ken said to me, you know, we're going to have to kill him. We're going to have to kill him. This is worse than anything.
Because he was too nice now.
Yeah, he was very strange. And we'd always said when we all planned to kill him, and we did all sorts of things. I used to grind up glass and he had a shed with knotting and all sorts of things, put it into gravy and mix it all up, put it on his dinner. My mum used to put his dinner on a saucepan. And he had to have his meal immediately he walked through that front door. His dinner had to be on the table. And so I mix all this stuff. He never died, but he has terrible, terrible ulcers.
Yeah.
And so we planned then we're going to have to kill him. We can't live with this. It was like living on a knife edge. We were waiting for him to explode and do something terrible. But actually, it never happened.
But he was genuinely changed, it seemed, when he came home.
On the Sunday, he made us all walk up to church. We went into the Baptist church. My brother Phil had been up there. I don't quite know why Phil had decided to go, but anyway, he said, we'll go up to the Baptist church. So we went up to Cookfield Baptist Church, and we all went in, Dad smoked, Mum smoked, Phil smoked, everybody smoked. We all stunk of fags, but Dad gave us all a polo so nobody knew. And we walked into church. We just must have, this, a fug coming off us. And never been into church in my life. And we sat in church, and Errol Hulse, wonderful, wonderful man, was preaching on the prodigal son. And he said, and when the father saw the son afar off, he ran to meet him, and he held his arm out, and he hugged the son. And my dad, in the middle of this service, my dad just put his hand up and said, that was me. That's how I feel. That's what God did to me. I feel like that was me. That story. We were just thinking, he's gone mental. He's definitely gone. There's something really peculiar going on here. And Errol was very lovely and said, that's wonderful. He was South African. That's wonderful, brother. He said, I'll talk to you after. But he just kept interjecting all the way through. Oh dear, mental man, he's mental. But that was the beginning of my dad's Christian life. And it was genuine. Yeah. Absolutely genuine. Our life at home changed. He disciplined us. He always said he couldn't hit us when he was angry. He had to wait till he calmed down and then he would hit us. So he still hit us. Yeah. But it was all different. It was all different.
And I know you talked a bit about he would act out Bible stories and things.
Oh, because
to the family and
yes, he did. We were in church one Sunday, and Errol said that we, as Christians, we are in the church, but we're not in the world, but not of the world. And that was fabulous. We came home, and those of you who are older will remember the rediffusion star that used to come on the telly, and it said, "We bring the world into your home." My dad just looked at me and went, "Get that out. We're not having the world in our house. Get it out." And so the telly went out, got smashed in the back garden. And the radio went, everything that brought the world into our, we're not having that, get it out. And so in the evenings, he would read Bible stories and he would act them out. And I did learn such a lot of Bible verses and stories and parables, all, in those times when he would teach us as children, as teenagers. And I mean, never ever, from the moment he came out of prison, he never touched me sexually again. And I waited every night. I would be so scared when I heard but then I was confident that he wasn't going to go, that his life was so different that I knew that he wouldn't. That was something else.
And so your dad was a different person. Yeah. And you were kind of about 15 around this time, 14, 15. And so your dad had come to faith. And tell us a bit about your faith then. Did you kind of come to faith at that stage?
Well, no, but Dad would say to us all, you all need Jesus in your lives. He's the one that transforms. The Father forgives, Jesus changes us. And the Holy Spirit fills us and enables us to live as Christians. So you've all got to ask Jesus into your life. Now, what a plonker I was, because I didn't actually ask Jesus into my life. I just said I had, because I wanted him to love me. I liked this not being scared. I liked this not being abused. And he was trying to love us in his way. I could tell that. I knew that. And I liked it. I wanted to be loved in the right way. And I knew that would please him. So I said, I've asked Jesus into my life and I've become a Christian and I love him and I want to serve him for the rest of my life. And so he said, fantastic, so I really pleased him. And then I had to go before the elders of the church and give a testimony. I made up a smashing testimony. And I did, I made it all up because we were all liars and deceivers and thieves, and that's what we did. Sure. And so here I made this fabulous testimony up and got baptised and everything. And of course, I thought, this is wonderful. They all love me. Dad loves me. Mum sort of likes me. Mum never liked me much anyway. And so I thought, I've pleased everybody. But then you've got to go to church and you've got to go to the prayer meeting. You've got to be really... I didn't want to. And,
tell me about it, Faye. No.
And my dad, because he had now come out of prison, one of the chaps in the church, a lovely man called Graham Slegg, was a builder. And he employed Dad as a painter and decorator, taught him a trade. And he was a wonderful, wonderful... disciple for my dad. He discipled my dad. And so I'd left home by this time. At 15, I left home and went to work and live in a school for deaf children. And my dad got the job painting it. So I wouldn't go to church, and then on the Monday morning my dad would be at the window painting, saying, why weren't you at church? Get yourself to church. It took him 2 years to paint this blooming school. And I'd get to the prayer meeting, go to church and something. He was there, and so I left that school and I went to work at Great Wallstead School, and he got the job painting it.
So he's just following you to do painting jobs.
He was, and so in the end I left Sussex and went up to Durham.
And so I think I'm right in saying it was when you were up there then actually you came to faith, because am I right in thinking when you were about 22 or 23, your brother, one of your brothers came to faith, and he came to visit you. Is that right? He came to visit you?
Yeah, he did.
Yeah. So tell us what happened there about kind of that conversation and where it led.
Well, my little brother John, who is just fabulous, I love him to bits, and he had actually become a Christian, and he came up to Durham to tell me that he'd become a Christian, and he said to me, Faye, Jesus is real and he does change lives. And I said, oh John, I think, it's all right when you're old like them, but I want to be able to have a life. I don't want to be a boring old fart like them. And I didn't want that. I did, no. And he said, but you've got to, it's life and death. Shut up. You're taking it a bit far. Yeah. And he said, no, it's real. Jesus is real and he loves us and he died for us. And he said, I said, oh, well, John, look, I'll just sit on the fence and, until I'm about 80, and then I'll become a Christian when I've had a life and done all the yippee-doo-dah-ing that I want to do.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And so I said that's what I was going to sit on the fence. And he said, there isn't a fence, Faye. You're either saved or you're damned. Oh, shut up. That's a bit harsh. And he said, no, that's what the Bible says. That's what God tells us. And he sent Jesus to rescue us from that. And I want you to be in heaven with me, he said. I don't want you to go to hell. I said, no, I'm on the fence. No, there is no fence. Yeah, right then. He will promise me, he said, you'll go to church, even if it's just once. And I was so touched that he'd come up to tell me this. And then he prayed. He sat there and prayed, and that I would go. And I thought, I've got to go for him. I've got to go once. So I was going out with Greg at this time. And I said, I've got to go to church. I've told John went back to Sussex. I've got to go to church just once. Come with me. And so he said, all right. So we went, found this little Methodist church. And honest, for all the world, you'd have thought those little black shapes with a little black hat, and they look like little old ladies, and that they've been kept in a cupboard and brought out on a Sunday. And they all look identical, little hats. And us, and we snuck in the back, and they said, the preacher got up and said, today we're going to be talking about the fence. I thought, what? And he said, people say they're going to sit on the fence, but there is no fence. You're saved or you're damned. I tell you, you could have knocked me over with a feather. And I thought, I knew, having lived with my dad, and as radical as he was a villain, he was now a radical Christian. And so I'd heard, I knew that when God spoke, he spoke like, this is how God speaks to you. And I thought, this is God speaking to me. And Greg and I were both on the dole at that time. And so when the collection plate came round, I just emptied my purse because I wanted God to know he could have all of me, everything I have. Greg was sat next to me. He thought I was looking for change. And he just went, what? And then he said, well, I'm off. And he went down to the pub. He just dropped out. And I stayed in the church, this is church. And the youngest bloke there was the organist. And I remember saying to him, I need somebody to pray with me. I think God's speaking to me. And this bloke was obviously not a Christian, I don't think, because he said to me, why, pet, where do you come from? You don't talk like me. Where are you from? And I said, Sussex. Oh, I thought I want to go down there. And he was all like, and I'm saying, no, I need somebody to pray with. And he said, well, whereabouts in Sussex? And I thought, this is ridiculous.
Just buying time.
Yeah, he didn't know what to say to me, I don't think. Anyway, I thought, right. So I went home and I went up into my bedroom and I thought, well, Lord, if you're really there, if you are real, if this is you speaking to me, then if I'm going to be a Christian, I want to be a faithful Christian. I want to be like Job, remembering the stories that my dad told us as, when he used to do the Bible stories in the evenings. I want to be faithful. I don't want to be the pathetic thing that I was at 15 when I wasn't a Christian. I want to be completely committed to you. And so make me like Job, please, and forgive me. And nothing happened. So I was a bit disappointed. I thought, well, I was expecting something, a lightning bolt or something.
Yeah.
Nothing. So that was a bit disappointing, really. And so I remember thinking, well, what happens then? What do you do? You've prayed. What do you do? How do you know? And at that time, I was living with my gran. And every time I said I was going to come down south to see Mum and Dad, because I had a real longing to see my brothers. They were so precious to me, and I missed them desperately. And every time I said I was coming down, my granny would say, "What you want to go down there for? He's a religious nutter. You don't be down there." And she was terrified I was going to stay. She loved having me with her. And anyway, I came downstairs, and as I say, disappointed that I hadn't heard God's voice or something happen. And my granny said to me, "Why don't you go down south for a bit?" And I thought, she would never say that. Must be God telling me.
It's really out of character for her.
Completely. So I thought, I'm doing it. I said, yeah, I'm doing it. I'm going to go now.
Yep.
Packed a case, went to Darlington bus station. And you didn't have to book then like you do now. You just went. And so I got to Darlington bus station, said to the bloke, "Is this the London coach?" And he said, "Yes." "Why, I pet," he said. And I said, "Right, can I have a ticket single?" And so he said, his very words were, "I've no seats, pet." And so I said, you must have. Because I thought, well, if God's organising this, he will have saved me a seat, at least. I'm so naive. Anyway, that's what I thought. If that's God speaking and God leading, there will be a seat. Anyway, so I said, "You must have." And he went, "No, pet." And the bloke on the front seat who was reading a book just went, "Did you say London coach?" And I said, he said, his very words were, "Why, you bugger, I'm on the wrong coach." That was his very words. And so he got off.
This is the gritty testimonies right here. That's what we're getting.
That's what he said. And so I got on. He got off and I got on. And it was on that bus that I met God. I met God on a bus.
Wow.
I know. I'd taken my Bible, I was reading my Bible, and it just came alive to me. It was just the most wonderful thing. And I was just praying and saying, God, I know this is you. I know you're real. I know you love me. I know you forgive me. And I felt for the first time in my life completely loved. I'd never felt loved very much. But here I felt completely loved, completely accepted. I felt like God had wrapped his arms around me, and I felt completely sort of snuggled into him. I know it sounds peculiar, but that's how I felt. And that long journey back from Darlington to London seemed to go so quickly because I was being loved.
Sort of overwhelmed by this
totally,
thing.
totally.
And weren't you quite concerned as well? Because didn't you have to ring your family because you asked to be like Job?
I did. And then, the next morning when I'd prayed this prayer, and then the next morning when I woke up, I had boils all down my arms. On both arms, I had all these boils. And I thought, hey? And so I quickly got my Bible, and here was Job sat on this ash heap, scraping his boils, and all his family had died, and all his sheep and his camels. And I thought, oh no, I didn't mean like that. And so we didn't have a phone, so I ran across the phone box, and that's when I said to my mum, "I think you're all going to die." And she said, "What are you talking about, you daft ape?" And I said, "Well, I've prayed this prayer and I've got boils and everything, and like Job." And she said, "Oh, talk to your father." And I put my dad on the phone, and I said, "Dad, this has happened." He said, "It's just God showing you that he's heard you. He knows you're daft and you needed a really big sign.
Something very visible.
And so he's given you one." And I said, "What shall I do?" And he said, "Well, don't ask me, ask God." And that's when I came downstairs and Granny said, "Go." And so I came, and that's, yeah.
Wow.
So that was...
And so tell us a bit, just briefly about, because you were dating Greg, who is your husband,
yeah.
At that point, and Greg wasn't a Christian. So just tell us what happened there.
Well, it was all, I was so in love with him. He was just the gentlest, kindest person. And, but I'd been brought up from Dad becoming a Christian and being told that you shouldn't be unequally yoked to an unbeliever. And here I am now, a Christian, and he's so not. And when I went back and said to him, look, this has happened, he took my Bible and he threw it across the room and he said, it's a load of crap. You've just been brainwashed. Don't believe all that. And I said, it's not, it's real. And so I was just sort of pouring all this out to him. And he just said, Faye, nonsense. I don't want to hear any more about it. And so I said, well, darling, if that's the way you feel, then I can't marry you, because this is really important to me. And it's life-changing. And I've asked God to make me faithful, and I can't marry you because you're not, we need to be in this together. And so if you want to marry me, you have to be a Christian. And so he stropped off. And I gave him his ring back, and I was heartbroken, really, because I did love him. And so I said, God, if this is what you're calling me to do, then you're going to have to take away the love I have for him and help me to do this. And that happened. And I had a real desire for Greg to become a Christian, but I wasn't, like that passionate love. I wasn't in love with him. I loved him and I wanted him saved. And so I came back. I thought I couldn't live up there. I needed to be down here. So I came back down south. And Greg, bless him, wrote to me every single day. And he would write, darling, this is stupid. We're meant to be together. I love you, da-da-da-da. And I'd write back, dear Greg, thank you so much for your letter. I've enclosed a book that I think you should read. And have you been to church? And are you a Christian yet? And so this went on for, a good year. And he would come down and stay with us. And on a Sunday morning, we would all sit in a circle before we went to church and pray as a family. And Greg would sit in, and he said he'd sit in the circle, but he couldn't pray because he said he didn't know who we were talking to. And then he would come to church, and he said, I can see that it's real for you, but it's not real for me. And anyway, after a year, he rang up and said, you'll never guess what's happened. He said, I've become a Christian. I thought, he's just saying that. So I said, oh, come down, let me have a look at you. Come down, let me see. And he came down on the Saturday night, and bless him, he was so full of how he'd become a Christian, and he went to church, and the man said, if Jesus came tonight, would you be ready? And he said he realised he wouldn't. And so he got on his knees and confessed and poured out his heart to God, and knew that Jesus was his saviour. So but I thought, he's just saying that. Anyway, in the morning, on the Sunday morning when we prayed, Greg prayed this most wonderful prayer, and that love that I had for him came back. Yeah. And Greg always tells everybody, I think that was in the September. He was baptised in the January. We were married in the March, and then our daughter, he tells everybody, was born in the April. But it was the following. Yeah. And so
how to create the scandals there, Greg.
Yeah.
So, amazing really that, you'd been in this situation and your home life had been terrible, and an amazing work in your father's life, and an amazing change, and amazing work then in your life as well. Just complete change again.
Yeah.
Just tell us a bit about how your father went on in his faith.
Okay. Well, then it gets desperately, desperately sad, because must be 18 years ago. My dad he wrote a book. He was preaching. He was giving his testimony here, there, and everywhere. And we were so proud of him. And because I've got nephews, and my son adored the bones of him, we all loved him. He was this tough guy, Christian, very, very sort of off-piste type of Christian, radical, very radical. He would shout across the road, "How is it with thy soul, brother?" And he was just utterly committed. And so 18, 19 years ago, my son, bless him, came home and was in a desperately sad, and shared with me a secret that he'd heard that night, that my father had been abusing another family member for years. Well, you can imagine, I was horrified. And So we called all the family together, shared this, thought, he can't do this. It was just the most awful thing, because he was now, what he did to me, he did as a non-Christian and stopped. And then here he was as a Christian, doing exactly the same thing. And that taught me a great lesson about sin. I kind of see it like a dandelion. Sin is like a dandelion with this great long root that goes down into you. It's got you. And I think what my dad did was to chop the leaves off. And so, or to all intents, not that he ever said sorry to me, or it was never discussed. When he used to give his testimony before I actually became a Christian, and he used to give his testimony, I quite often used to think, why don't you tell them what you did to me? They wouldn't think you were so clever then, would they? You know.
Yeah.
So it was a bitter root in me, that was. But this sin in my dad, I don't think he ever confessed it. And so when the opportunity arose, this root it grew. And so he'd been abusing this other family member, and so we went to the police. He was arrested. He said he was innocent and all of this, and then he changed his plea. Thankfully, my brother John went to see him and said, you own this.
Yeah.
And so he did. He changed his plea to guilty, and he went to prison. But he never came home. He never came back to Sussex. He came out of prison and they moved up to Blackpool, and he went back to this hedonistic lifestyle that he'd lived prior to becoming a Christian. I think, really and truly, he thought he'd blown it with God. And that's, I don't know.
Do you think that, so to hear obviously that was still going on is completely shocking.
Yes.
But the other stuff, I've got the sense when I've talked to you about it before, that it wasn't that the rest of it was an act.
I'm absolutely convinced. I believe with all my heart that he became Christian.
Yeah, because it was such a dramatic change.
Absolutely,
and you think,
for years.
Yeah.
But for years,
but I think that image you use, and I love the image you use of that dandelion, that the root goes deep with sin.
Yeah.
And the sense that you give is that there was this one thing that perhaps he never really brought, he never confessed, he never came to you.
Because that's not a tough guy thing.
Yeah. And almost, I think, I think you were chatting about it earlier and saying that you maybe felt that, or that he felt that even God didn't know about that.
He
like
kept
that
it
was
a
the
bit
thing.
Sneaky thing. That was his.
Yeah.
That was his dirty secret.
It was almost so taboo that you couldn't bring that out into the public sphere.
Yeah.
So that kind of took hold and things.
Yeah.
And so, obviously, devastating effect on you and the family.
Oh, my kids all turned away from Christianity because of it. My nephews all said it was all a load of rubbish. It was fake, like he was. I don't think he was fake. I think he just hadn't ever confessed that sin. Never dealt with it, never faced it, never. And there it was.
And so, but that still really isn't even the end of the story, is it? Because your father has passed away now. 3
years today.
Is it really?
3 years today. Yeah.
Well, tell us a bit about what happened at the end of his life. I think you said you were you asleep in bed?
I had a dream. I had a dream that my dad was dying. I'd had dreams before and had gone up to see him when God had spoken to me through a dream to get a letter for this other family member who was very ill and not coping very well. And I needed my dad to own his sin. And so I'd gone. In this dream, I saw a table in this kitchen that had a dirty, filthy plastic doily tablecloth on with tea stains and everything. And I put a piece of paper on the table. My dad was ill, and he wrote a letter. And I woke up in a sweat and said to Greg, I need to do this. I need to go. I did. Dad did write me the letter. I gave it to the family member, and her life changed from there on. But here we are now, another dream, and that he was dying. And then the next morning, I think my sister-in-law rang and said somebody had rung her to say that he was in hospital or something. I can't kind of think. But anyway, I said to Greg, I'll ring the hospital and see if he is in. And he was in hospital. And I said, we need to go. So Greg, bless his heart, such a faithful, I love him to bits, said, yep, okay, he came with me, said, right, let's pray and let's go. And we smartened up, we went all poshed up, because I come in the name of God. And I want, do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I'm going into, I don't know what, and see, So we all poshed up, and we went up and got to the hospital and walked into this ward, and there's my dad. He was 6 foot of pure muscle, and here he is now, bag of skin and bone, but still the same face, still the same dad. And I had found it very hard to deal with his sin towards this other family member, and because he did it as a Christian, and how, lives and faith had been shattered because of him. And so I carried that in me, and I walked into the ward, and he opened his eyes, looked at me, and just said, "Fay, forgive me." Well, I tell you, I went mental. How dare you? There's not just me. There's John, there's Kayla, there's Ken, there's Phil, there's Maggie, there's all the children. You destroyed our family. You broke our family with what you've done. How can you just think you can say, "Forgive me"? I'll forgive you. And so he said, "Well, when I get out, I'll put things right." And I just said, "You're not getting out. You are dying." Greg poked me in the back and went, "That's a bit strong." And gently, he said, and he said, "Who told you?" Dad said, "Who told you?"
Because he thought you'd seen a nurse or a doctor, didn't he?
He thought the doctor told me. And I said, "God told me." Well, he went as white as this dress. Face just drained. And he started praying. And I wanted to suffocate him. I want to take a pill. "Don't you dare. How dare you think you can do that now? How dare you? All that you've done, all that you've destroyed, all the way you've lived in the last 18 years, how can you think you can do that?" And as I was feeling all of that, I felt like God just poured a blanket of peace all over me. And I just went really calm, and I watched my dad praying, and I watched grace outpouring. And what came to my mind was that scripture where Jesus says, "I will lose none that the Father has given me." And I saw grace in action. I saw my dad being snatched from the mouth of hell. And it was the most surreal thing, really. Most heart-wrenching. And he prayed and he prayed and he prayed, and we just stood there as he prayed. And I just thought, this is God so loves us. And here I am looking at my dad who's dying, and God is rescuing him even now. He's bringing, because he loved him.
Yeah.
And that God's love is just so perfect. And it was just the most amazing thing, really. And I just thought, I really quite wanted him to burn a bit. You know what I mean? I did.
Well, that's what I said to you when we chatted about this the other day, that it's, as you talk about this, and the exact phrase you used were, his feet must have been burning, and being, this idea of being snatched from the jaws of hell. Yeah. And we both talked about it and said, that is grace, isn't it? And it's amazing. But I think is that even for those of us like you and me, and I'm sure people listening in, will be very convinced of grace, and of course. But I know when I hear this, there's still a little bit of me where you think like, it just seems so scandalous that you could have done these things. Yeah. But of course, that is grace.
That's God's love. That's his perfect love. Perfect love. Perfect. And we are imperfect. And even though he had done the most heinous things, he was repentant.
Yeah.
He was at the last. And he puckered his lips as if wanting me to kiss him. And I did. I did kiss him. And I said, "I won't see you again unless I see you in glory." And we came out of there, and I still felt completely... But we got on the bus, and I think I cried from Blackpool to Peterborough. I just cried. It was the most But it was a cleansing thing. I felt like all that hatred and all that bitterness that I was carrying around because I wanted him to die. I wanted him to go. I didn't want him to pray that prayer. I didn't want him to be forgiven.
Mm.
Who am I? Who am I? I've been forgiven. I tried to kill him, So, I think God is just an amazing father. He was a rubbish father, mine, but he's and it's got nothing to do with, it's not about him being a bad man. It's about him being a wonderful God.
Yeah.
And that I saw it, there was this, and that he died the next morning. And when I got a phone call the next day to say he died today, 3 years ago,
Yes.
today. Yeah.
Faye, it is, it's an amazing story. I mean, I'm sure as people listened in, they'll have been absolutely rapt by what they've heard. And I remember when I first heard this and you came in and spoke to the youth group about it when I was doing youth work, and I think I asked you an initial question about, tell us what life was like growing up, and I didn't know your story. And you got to the end of this section and I kind of was like, I don't know what to say now, Faye. But I mean, thank you for coming and talking to us. I hope, I know I don't think we've got any questions, but I know people have been commenting and been saying how useful they've found it, and they know people who will find it useful to hear this.
Good.
But just amazing to hear of the grace and the work of God in your life and in your dad's life, even though, that in some ways has been a very painful experience.
Yeah.
That wonderful truth, like you say, of, I won't lose one.
No.
No. And even at the end, no matter how much that, even for those of us who are committed to that, can feel the rankle of that a little bit, we also understand, how sinful we are, and it's grace we all need, and stuff. So, Faye, thank you so much for coming and speaking and being so open and honest, because I know it's a harrowing story as well. So, thank you.
My pleasure.
Thank you. We're pretty much at the end. We're going to kind of wrap up in a few seconds now. Again, a big thank you to Faye. Just to say that we'll be back next week at 1:00. I'm going to be talking to a guy called Sam, Sam used to be in my youth group, and so we're going to be chatting a bit about what it was like being a Christian at school, and he's now at university, so we're going to chat a bit about kind of challenges there. So maybe you're a student or you know students, and you'll be able to kind of tune in and hear some of that. Hopefully it will be useful for you. If you've been watching this live and the connection's dropped a bit, I've tried to keep an eye on it. It's been, of course, yesterday when we did the tests, it was absolutely fine. Nothing happened at all. But today, up and down a little bit. The recording should be up on YouTube later in the day, and I'll probably repost it to Facebook in a kind of version that doesn't have any breaks in it, so it should be okay. But hopefully you've enjoyed it. If you've enjoyed this, do like our page, like Speak Life UK. Do share stuff around. Share this content with people that you think it would be useful for, because we love for this stuff to be used. So, guys, thank you so much for tuning in. Thank you again to Faye, and we will see you next time. Thank you very much.